Hey everybody, this is Mark Allen, 6-time Ironman World Champion, and you are listening to the Physio Performance Show.
And the winner is...
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Welcome back, or welcome to the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by Sanitarium PB and Pogo Physio. I'm Brad Beer, physiotherapist by trade and training, and founder of Pogo Physio. The aim of this show is to educate and inspire you towards the pursuit of your own physical best performance. We do this through interviews featuring some of the world's top physical performers and also some of the world's preeminent experts in their chosen fields. Each week, we'll aim to bring you the highs, the lows, and the learnings of the featured guests across featured performer episodes, expert editions, interest editions, and coaches' corner editions. Now this week, we keep the triathlon great theme going. Last week, we featured Olympic triathlon champion Nicholas Spirig, and this week, I bring you a conversation that I recently had with triathlon great Mach Allen. To the triathlon, multi-sport, endurance sport loving listeners, Mach Allen needs very little introduction. But by bio, perhaps Mark's career is best summed up by 4 numbers. The 4 numbers being 1, 6, 21, and infinity. The 1 represents Mark's victory in the first ITU World Triathlon Olympic Distance Championships, a race won in 1989 in Avignon. The 6, well, that represents Mark's 6th historic Hawaii Ironman World Triathlon Championship titles. The 21, that represents a 21 race winning streak that Mark had through the height of his career. And the infinity, well, in 2012, ESPN rated Mach Allen as the greatest endurance athlete of all time. There's so much to Mach Allen by way of achievement. His career spanned an incredible 15 years, winning his last Hawaii Ironman title at the age of 37. And it wasn't just Mark's longevity that stood out. As you'll hear today, Mark, I believe, was well ahead of his time in the sport. You see, Mark persevered when many would have quit. He first went to Hawaii, as you'll hear today, in 1982 as a tactic to delay a career. He was curious about this race that captured his attention, and within 7 months, he was on the start line and racing competitively. In 82, Mark had a DNF in the Hawaii Ironman. In 83, Mark finished 3rd, 84 5th, 86 2nd, 87 2nd, 88 5th, and 89 was Mark's breakthrough victory over the great Dave Scott, the Iron War. And on today's episode, Mark takes us behind the scenes of the insights and the keys that helped him to catalyse that historic victory. Mark shares around the importance of patience and what it was that allowed him to persevere through those testing, trying years in order to get that historic first victory in 89. And Mark shares how it was impossible to go on to win a total of 6 Hawaii Ironman victories across 6 starts. Up until 2017, Mark held the run course record in Hawaii, running a blistering 2 hours and 40 minutes. And it's only just been bettered by the current Hawaii Ironman champion, Patrick Langer of Germany. Mark shares some fascinating tips today around the champion's mindset, how to quiet your mind in times of duress, the importance of setting a goal and sticking with it, the concept of going slow to go fast, and of course there's the usual performance round and physical challenge for the week. There is so much in this episode, the highs, the lows, and the learnings from the great Mach Allen. We start the conversation with a fun story around Mark's last outing on the Gold Coast, Australia, and the mistake he made that ended up costing him the end of that historic 21 race winning streak. Here is my conversation with Mach Allen. Well, as a triathlon lover and someone that entered the sport in 1990 as a junior here in Australia, to spend this time with today's guest, Mach Allen, is a pinch myself moment. So, Mach Allen, you're there at home in Santa Cruz. I'm here on the Gold Coast. Thanks for joining us on the Physical Performance Show.
Yeah, I'm more than happy, and it's always great to talk to somebody in your neck of the woods. I love going there and racing there all the years that I did. It's where I would open my season so many years, and so I have great memories. It was where I would be training all winter, and then going down there to the Gold Coast and racing was sort of like showing the world, okay, this is where I'm at this year. And usually it was pretty darn good, so I loved it.
And so what was the last year of racing on the Gold Coast? When would have that been, and how did the result play out?
The last year was around 1992. And the reason that I remember it is that I had been on a winning streak of 21 races from the beginning, the end of 1988 all through 1990 and 1991. In 1992, Outside Magazine, which you can see this on your Skype, but Outside Magazine came out with a cover here in the beginning of 1992, and it said, "Why no one can beat this man, the cosmic powers of triathlete Mach Allen." Like, I'm not cosmic. I live on the earth, right? And so anyway, I was on this winning streak, 21 races from the end of 1998 all the way through the end of 1991. Outside Magazine makes it sound like I'm just like this unbeatable dude, right? And so the first race of the season was the race on the Gold Coast, and it was an Olympic distance race that year. It had been kind of a 2/3, 3/4 Ironman distance race for a lot of years, and they shortened it. It was kind of a different thing. So anyway, I hadn't prepared as much as I had like to in that early part of the winter here in California. But I thought, cosmic powers of Mach Allen, I can focus, I can just do all this positive stuff and, positive imagery and all the other stuff that goes into great performances, right? I mean, if you don't have the right mindset, then forget it. You can train all you want, but if you fall apart in the competition, you're not going to win. So anyway, I thought, okay, depend on those cosmic powers that Outside Magazine wrote about. And so I went down there and I had this amazing swim, came out of the water with a lot of the Aussies that I had never actually stayed with before because, as you know, the Australian triathletes are super good swimmers. I got on the bike and immediately just fell apart. A guy named Mike pulled away. He won the race. My winning streak ended. And so, I hate to admit it, but my final race on the Gold Coast, I lost. I didn't win it. But it actually really taught me a lot of lessons. It's like, okay, you really do have to just every year start back and go to the basics. Go to the core things that get you fit. You cannot shortchange any of those. And, my winning streak ended that year, unfortunately, but I did pull it together and kind of regroup and go back to the basics from that point forward. And of course, I went on and was able to win Ironman at the end of that year for, I guess it was the fourth time at that point. So anyway, that's a long story that goes with the Gold Coast and my last race there.
It was so interesting, and it was, I think it was the World Cup it was called back then. Is that right? The World Cup?
Yeah.
And so Mark, well, thanks for taking us there. And to give a bit more context, I mean, to endurance junkies, to endurance sports fans, you need no introduction for your accolades. But to give a little bit of context, we sort of will explore the highs, lows, and the learn-ins with an emphasis on the learn-ins because you've got so much to offer anyone pursuing their physical best from the rich learnings that you've had and you've since articulated into print with your books, which we'll speak about. But Mark, in terms of context, you've told your story many times, but starting out, what first grabbed your attention about this sport called triathlon? Because you were one of the real pioneer professionals in this sport.
The first year that I ever even heard anything about a triathlon, heard anything about Ironman was in 1982. I was 24 years old. I'd been out of college for 2 years. I had a degree in biology, but I didn't really have a career path. And so, I was searching, I was looking. I had been a swimmer growing up for 12 years, but I was very mediocre as a swimmer. I never set records. I never even qualified for Olympic trials or anything that was like a world-class type of thing. So anyway, in 1982, I saw the Ironman on television on Wide World of Sports in February. I turned it on, and Jim McKay, who was like the iconic announcer at that time for Wide World of Sports, was talking about this 2.4-mile swim and 112-mile bike ride and a marathon. And I thought, how many days is it going to take these crazy people to finish this thing? And of course, he said, they start at 7 in the morning and the last person has to finish by midnight, 17 hours later. And I thought, there's no way anybody could do that. But of course, so many of the people that started actually did that. And they didn't look like superhuman beings. They looked like ordinary people, but they were doing this extraordinarily amazing thing. And 2 weeks later, I went from thinking it was a freak show to thinking, I want to go there and see if I can cross the Ironman finish line. And so that was what really inspired me to just try it, to try to go to the Ironman, see if I could complete the distance. I did go there. I ended up training for whatever that was the next 7 months. I figured, hey, I'm going to go do the Ironman in 7 months. That's the biggest stall tactic ever for having to come up with a real career choice, right? Just train for 7 months, and then after that, I'll figure out what I'm going to do. Well, it turned out that in that race that year, 1982, I was 24. I came out of the water in second place behind the guy who at the time was really, he was the best. He was setting the standard, Dave Scott. I thought, this is crazy. How can I be on the feet of the leader of the race and the leader being the best guy in the world? And so, I headed out on the bike, and I'm kind of in this unbelieved euphoria. And so halfway through the bike ride, we were still together. We made the turn at Hobby. We had a 5-minute gap on everybody else. And shortly after that, I thought, I've never talked to this guy before. So I figured perfect time for an introduction, right? And so I pulled up next to him and I go, hey, Dave, when we're done with the bike, you want to go for a run? Here I'm in the middle of the Ironman, and I'm joking with this guy. And he was not in a joking mood. He goes, who are you? And I said, Mark Allen. And he goes, oh, I think I heard your name before. And he clicked his bike into a big gear, and he took off. And so I tried to follow, but the second I clicked my bike, my derailleur broke, and my race was ended right there about halfway through the bike ride. And so that first year was very impactful on two different levels. The first was I was with the best guy in the world for 4 hours of racing. And so, the thought occurred to me, maybe if I take my time and develop my skills as a triathlete, I can be the winner of this race. I didn't know. But the other thing was that I didn't even get to achieve the most basic goal of the day, which is to cross the finish line. So on that level, it was very disappointing. So I had these two polar emotional things that had happened on that day. I didn't finish, but I saw this window open up that said, maybe you can be the best at this sport, one of the best at least. That was my beginning. That was my initiation. That was my first time out. And right after that, I was invited to be part of a local triathlon team in San Diego that was sponsoring athletes and paying them salaries. And all of a sudden, I was actually able to make a living doing this thing that I was really kind of getting pretty excited about doing.
So, Mark, I'm going to go forwards to come back and fill a little bit in here. As you said, something clicked in your mind that maybe you could be the best at this thing called Ironman Triathlon. It was, in the early pioneering days, and, it was not what we would now know Ironman as, the enterprise that it is with, such organisation. But you thought maybe I could be the best in the world. And then here you are come 2012, and ESPN, I believe, through their polling, had Mark Allen as the greatest, voted as the greatest endurance athlete of all time. So could that 24-year-old, full of, I guess, enthusiasm, as you said, and, a degree of brashness, I'm sure, as at that age, could that 24-year-old have imagined what actually lay in store for him?
Absolutely no way could I have ever imagined what would unfold in the years to come. When ESPN held that poll, they were trying to, it was a poll to determine who was the greatest athlete of all time, and so they had a bunch of different categories, like greatest endurance athlete of all time, greatest boxer, greatest game changer, greatest, all these different categories of athletes, and people would vote out of a list that they had assembled. First of all, somebody emailed me and they said, "Hey, you're in this vote that's happening right now to determine the greatest endurance athlete of all time. They have five or six of you guys, different sports. Diana Nyad, great swimmer, was in one in there. The record holder of the marathon at the time was in there. A bunch of amazing people, a cross country skier. It just blew me away that I was even on the list. And then when I found out that I had actually won the vote, it blew my mind, because I got into the sport of triathlon purely because of the personal challenge, the enjoyment that I felt when I was training, the camaraderie that I was gaining through with my training partners by just being out there and doing it day in and day out. And then all of a sudden, you fast forward, like you said, to the future here, and what I was doing just kind of as something that was fun, that certainly I was dedicated to, other people were looking at and saying, you know what you did was pretty amazing. And it was surprising to me, but I never looked at it as amazing. But when that poll was finalized and I was given that title, it's like, wow, I guess people really are looking at what we're doing in triathlon, what we're doing racing Ironman, and people outside the sport understand that it is an extremely challenging and complex race to win, and to be able to do that is it's something special for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Let's stick with the struggle before we obviously speak about 89 and then your future victories beyond 89. But the struggle, I mean, your Hawaii Ironman victory, you went from 2 weeks, a 2-week gap from senior on Wild Water Sports to deciding you're going to go for it. You rock up, you have your first experience, as you just beautifully described, and then your record is the DNF there in 82 with the mechanical, 83 third, 84 fifth, 86 second, 87 second, 88 fifth with a flat, and then obviously 89, the big year. What was it that kept you going through those years? Did you have a galvanised belief in you that you could win this thing? Or was there times of obviously discouragement where you thought, this is beyond me, what am I doing?
The second year that I raced, I ended up in third, which was my first finish in Kona, and it was certainly something that I was excited about. However, from that point forward, I thought, let me see if I can win it. And so then I really started going for it. And each year, I felt like I had a really solid chance and ability to win, but each of those years, in those first 6 years, I would fall short. And so as the years piled up, it wasn't like from one year to the next, the disappointment was one more year. It was like it was magnitudes more challenging to just get back at it and say, okay, let me go back another time. After the third time not winning, it's like, okay, it's getting harder to go back. After the fourth time not winning, it's a lot harder. After the fifth time of not winning, it was nearly impossible. And after the sixth race there of not winning, of leading the race, of being off the bike first, being in the lead, halfway through the marathon, being in the lead with just a couple miles to go, every time blowing it, walking, and ending up slowing down, having Dave Scott pass me. After that sixth one, I had no idea if I could do it, and it took a lot of months of just soul searching to ask myself, should I really go back? My friends and family, we all have the people in our lives that tell us the stuff that we're unwilling to see about ourselves. And all of those people were saying to me, Mark, don't go back there. Go to the races where you know you can win. Go to the races where you have shown that you can beat Dave Scott. There's something about Hawaii that's not for you. Maybe it's the heat. Maybe it's the race is too long. We don't know what it is, but it's just not for you. I was so close to saying, you guys are right. But then in January, I just kind of sat with myself for quite a while, and I thought, you know what? I know I haven't had my best race there, and I've always been trying to win. I need to go back there and just have my best race for myself. I don't care if I win or not. And that became my goal in 1989. And so I changed some things about my training. I changed a lot about what I was focusing on. You know, instead of trying to beat Dave Scott, I was thinking, how can I get myself to the point where I can race hard all the way through that and not fall apart? And so it was a whole shift in my focus and how I trained. There was actually a lot less pressure, because if you're having your best race, you don't care where anybody else is. You can use people to help you have your best race, but you ultimately don't care. And so that was a shift that I went into 1989 with. But to circle it way back to your very first question there, it was very, very, very challenging, especially in the last couple of years there before I won, to pick up the pieces, to pull myself together, to not feel sorry for myself, and to just say, okay, what can I do differently this time that will help me to have a better performance there?
And I think, Mark, the beauty of the Mark Allen story is everyone appreciates the 6 victories that followed once you had your breakthrough, but it's the perseverance that I think makes you, your story and yourself as an athlete and a character, a human, so attractive in that everyone can relate to the struggle.
Well, we all have struggles. When we're in the middle of the struggle, we kind of feel like we're the only ones struggling. It's like, I'm the only one who's having a rotten time right now, or I'm the only one who's not succeeding, or I'm the only one who's falling short, and everybody else is succeeding and having a great time in life, and I'm struggling. Well, it's not that way. Every single person, being a human being, part of being a human being is learning how to manage struggle, how to deal with disappointment, how to surrender and just be willing to get out of your comfort zone to do the things that are necessary to accomplish and fulfill the dreams that are important to you, and to live a life that has meaning and fulfillment to you. It's anybody can sit on the couch, right? But that's not fulfilling. It's maybe easy, but it's not fulfilling. But when we really challenge ourselves, that's where we grow. That's when we learn about life, how to manage life, how to manage ourselves as we go through life, and how to pick up the pieces when it's not looking the way you'd hoped, and just to keep going anyway. Since '89, I've been studying with a gentleman named Brant Secunda. He's a shaman who teaches a tradition from the Huichol Indians who live in central Mexico. They have so many great sayings that are so simple, but if you can live them and apply them, your life can be transformed. Like one of them is, no matter how impossible something might look, take the next step anyway, because you never know, in the next step, in the next moment, things might turn around for you. And that type of philosophy truly helped me during my racing, and in the moments in the races, even the winning ones, where I didn't know if I could keep going or not.
Mark, the '89 breakthrough victory, you mentioned that your approach changed. You weren't worried about trying to beat Dave Scott. You weren't worried about, standing on the podium. You went there trying to have the best race you could, and your words were you didn't care where anybody else was. Surely, though, at 8 hours into it, where you made your decisive move, you did care where Dave Scott was at that point.
Ultimately, I wanted to have my best race. Aside from that, for sure, it felt like if I could hang on, if I could keep going and stay with Dave long enough and at some point pull away, I wasn't going to just roll over and say, hey, go ahead, Dave, you take it. For sure, I was going to do what I could to win. And, that decisive move was counterintuitive. We both knew as the race progressed that neither of us was capable of breaking the other one until the very end of the race. And there was one last long uphill on the Queen K Highway on the run before you drop down into town and then do the final little circuit to the finish line. So both of us knew that was where the main break was going to have to take place, because the rolling terrain leading up to that wasn't separating us. At the bottom of that hill was an aid station, and so your common sense or logic says, you grab your last glass of Gatorade or Coke or whatever you're drinking, get a little bit of fuel in the tank, and then take off. And so we both knew this. and we were both planning the same thing. And Dave actually accelerated just before we got to the aid station, so he got the inside track, and he reached over and he grabbed a glass of something, and I came in right behind him, ready to grab my last glass of nutrition, and something inside of me just said, "Go." And it was like I was shot out of a cannon. I pulled my hand back. I started to sprint as fast as I could, which, at the end of an Ironman, it's not very fast, but it's faster than we'd been going. And in the few seconds it took Dave to reach over, grab his glass, and look back, I'd opened up a gap, and it completely blew his mind, because I was pulling away at the very end of the race, which for sure had been his territory, his turf, his best, strongest point of the event every year that he'd raced it. And all of a sudden you can see it on the television broadcast that, his shoulders tighten up, he starts to rock, because he was having to deal with something that he'd never had to before. And I ended up, opening up the gap at that point that stuck to the finish.
Mark, you mentioned before we threw live that, a book that you co-authored with Brent Secunda there, who you mentioned, started to share some of his philosophies with you around, just being more centered in yourself. That really was the roadmap to your success that year in Kona. And, in the book that you've both authored there, Fit Soul, Fit Body, 9 Keys to a Happier You, I think it is. What are those 9 keys in brief? Obviously, if we want to get the full version, we can refer to the book. But can you outline those 9 keys? What was the roadmap to the Kona breakthrough for Mark Allen?
Yeah, there's... I'll highlight some of them as they specifically, really relate to that journey in Ironman. One of them is the keys is quiet your mind. We all have those moments in the race where things aren't going the way we hope. We're more tired than we want to be. Our legs are killing us. We want to quit. Somebody's pulling away. Somebody's stronger. Your nutrition isn't working. There's a million things that can go against you. But in those moments, if your mind starts to go crazy with all the negative self-talk, it pulls you out of your best performance. You start to worry, your muscles tighten up. And so that key of quiet your mind, if you can just take that breath and just kind of go, okay, there's a quiet space. And when you're quiet, then it doesn't matter if the race is going the way you want or it's not going the way you want. You are fully engaged in giving everything you have in that moment. That was a real key for me that I worked on, and that Brant helped me work on to get in the right place. Because in the many years before that, when something would go wrong, my mind would go crazy with, I'm too hot, I'm too tired, I should have trained differently, this guy's too strong, I can't close the gap, That is such a waste of energy. And so the sooner you can pull yourself back to that quiet space, the quicker you're fully engaged in giving everything you have. Another key is to know and set your quest. And that was a real key shift for me in 1989. Prior to that, my quest had been to beat Dave Scott and be the winner of the Ironman. In 1989, that quest changed to be have my best race. Having that even a more deep personal quest made it easier to really engage in the training and the preparation that I needed to be ready to win the race in Hawaii. But the companion key to that is to live what you ask for. There's a lot of people out there that say, I would love to win the Ironman. But doing what it takes, not only in your training, but also in the race, is a very different story. And we all know how that is. We have the big things in our lives that we set out to accomplish or to achieve or to fulfill. And living that can often be very, very challenging. One of the other keys is to connect with the spiritual world of nature. And that was also really important in Kona, in Hawaii, because the Big Island, for anybody who's been there, that you get off that plane in Kona, there's no air-conditioned jetway. They roll up these stairs. You walk right down onto the tarmac. Immediately, you're under the tropical sun. You feel the wind. You feel the heat. You feel the humidity. And you feel the intensity of the island. And in the early years of my racing there, I tried to hide from that intensity. Somehow I didn't want to have to deal with it. But in 89, I got off the plane and I thought, you know what? Let me just embrace this. connect with the spiritual world of nature, connect with that intensity, embrace it, welcome it and say, hey, this is what's here. Let me surrender to this and have my best race with it, and try not to change it. And there's so many keys like that. Certainly in training, one of the keys in the book is slow down to get faster. And that was also another key. The early years in my career, I was doing too much speed work. I was burning my body out. And, as an endurance athlete, certainly you do need to do some faster training, but human beings are endurance animals. We're designed and hardwired from the beginning of time to just have this slow, steady burn. And when we train based on those ancient genetics and fine tune it with, the little bit of modern stuff like the sprinting, it's sort of like the guys on the hunt, thousands of years ago. They would slowly run, chasing the game, tiring it out until it started to tire. And then as the game started to get more tired, the people, the hunters, would start to sprint faster and faster until they could finally overtake the game and kill them. And that's sort of like the model of how my training evolved into being. So there was a lot of aerobic, slow down type training with a little bit of that get faster stuff sprinkled in, just to make sure that I had all of the physiology covered. So there's just a lot of great keys like that. And one of the other keys is to honor yourself. And if you think about, I thought about that in 1989. I wasn't really honoring myself because I was looking at those first 6 races as failures because I didn't win. But finally, I looked back at them and I realized that because I finished each one of those very, very hard races, there was something that I had learned in each one of them that was a valuable lesson that I could carry with me and that I used in all of the races that I won in Kona. Had I not had those bad races, I wouldn't have learned the tough lessons that enabled me to get the most out of every moment that I could. So, in a bad race, if you're having a really bad day, you get the most out of it. Well, you're not going to win. But if you're having a good day and you get the most out of every moment, then you might actually be the winner. Honoring yourself is also saying, just because I had a bad day, it doesn't mean it was a failure. It means it's actually something cool is going to come out of that, because there's something that I learned, that I can probably learn from it, that will help me in the future to do better, to be a better person, to bring more into the endeavor that I'm putting all this energy into.
Mark, there is so much there. I mean, as you say, there's just a few of the 9 keys, but I'd heard you say that the only bad race is the one that you don't learn from, or learn something from. And so that really speaks to that key, right, about honouring yourself and maybe not being so hard on yourself.
Yeah, you got to wallow in your disappointment for a little while, but then after a couple days or a couple weeks or whatever, reflect back and figure out, what was it that I got out of that? What was it that there was something that I did there that I didn't necessarily think I could do. And so you sort of log that back in your way back deep down in your brain and in your heart somewhere. And then later on, maybe a few years later, all of a sudden that skill that you learned will come out in a situation where everything is going to turn out even better than you could have imagined because of that.
Mark, to slow down to go fast, I mean, someone might be listening in and hearing Mark Allen recount that and think, well, that worked for Mark Allen, but when I slow down, I'm concerned that I'm going to do myself a disservice because I'm not doing enough intensity in training. And obviously this extends beyond the physical body to really a general life principle, slowing down to go fast. But what would Mark Allen say to the listener who's thinking, well, I can't slow down, Mark. I've got to keep the pace up. I don't get out there to train very often. Mark, do you realise I've got a race in 3 months? What would Mark Allen, and I'm speaking, that person might be myself, Mark. What would your advice, your coaching be on that one?
My advice and my answer is always the same. It's you can't shortcut your physiology. Certainly, if you do a lot of fast stuff and that's the only thing you do, you're going to get really fit really quick. I mean, doing a lot of interval, high-intensity anaerobic work does give you fitness. However, it's high stress on your body. Anaerobic work is physiologically high stress. Slower aerobic training, and again, slower is a relative term because if you're aerobically fit, you're still going to be going pretty good pace. But aerobic training, the slow down to get faster part, is low stress on your body. So basically, you can kind of continually keep training and getting more metabolically efficient at burning fat, at utilizing fat for fuel, which builds your endurance engine as you do more aerobic training. The anaerobic training it raises VO2 max, which is good because it enables you to get more oxygen in to the working muscles quicker, but it's high stress. And over time, if you stress your body out day after day after day, you start to break down. We're not meant to do that. And in ancient times, the model is that basically life was fairly steady. You never saw, a tribal person living in an indigenous lifestyle doing wind sprints up the hillside in their cornfield or whatever it is. That just didn't happen. But, sometimes there was danger and they had to run to get away. So And so when you're going really fast like that, your ancient genetics are reading that as that there's danger around somewhere. And so it shuts off the fat-burning engine because you don't want slow-burning diesel fuel. You want to access high-octane carbohydrate for energy so that you can go fast. And so if your training regime is always fast, you're going to always be in a high-stress state. Your adrenal system is always going to be turned on, and your adrenal system is kind of like your reserve battery. And as you drain that down, then all of a sudden it becomes harder and harder to go hard. You feel like you're getting out of shape when in actuality you're burning yourself out. It can lead to depression. It can lead to injury. It suppresses your immune system. It lowers motivation. All of a sudden, you can't even get out of bed. That's not, in my opinion, what sport should be about. It should be about, over the long haul, exercising so that we have a long life of doing all these kind of things.
And your career, Mark, really typified that approach. A 15-year career when a lot of your original contemporaries in the early professional days didn't have that longevity. And you exited the sport uninjured and not burnt out on your own terms at, I think, 37, winning your final Hawaii Ironman World Championship title. What would be, aside from slowing down to go fast as a principle, what might be two other key principles for longevity physically, for anyone listening to have success in terms of their longevity physically, Mark?
Yeah, well, one of them is for sure it's important to do strength training in some form. Just running or just cycling or just swimming is great for cardiovascular fitness, but as we age, we lose lean muscle mass unless we do some form of strength training. And, there's many forms of it now. So there's no one prescription that I would say is best. But, doing resistance training where you're putting a heavy load on your muscle and you're doing short repetitions, sets of 10 or 12 or 15 reps, not 30, 40, 50 reps. That's almost like an endurance move. But if you are really lifting weights that are straining the muscle, or taxing the muscle, then it keeps that lean muscle mass strong and it keeps it intact. And that's kind of one of the biomarkers of aging. Biologically, you look much younger if you maintain that lean muscle mass. And then another thing, and this isn't even really about training, but it's the importance of sleep. Sleep is when our bodies rejuvenate. It's when our muscles repair from the training that we've done. It's when our adrenal system charges back up. If you have a lack of sleep, that is also a stress on your body. And in the modern world, it's pretty easy to not get enough sleep, because we're up late, we're checking our social media, or whatever it is that we're doing. We can occupy ourselves till all hours, and then we don't get enough sleep. For sure, sleep is a very key element of longevity.
And Mark, it is such a challenge in the modern world, and certainly, I'm a father of two young girls, and they're up and down through the night, and it's like, I want more, but I can't seem to access it. So anything you'd say to the person listening and say, Mark, I hear you, but help me.
My son was born in November of 1993, a month after I won my fifth Ironman title. And in 1994, I was exhausted the whole year because, here we had this newborn and I wanted to be a father. I didn't want to go sleep in some other house or anything, And so I was getting woken up at night like my wife, because they babies feed and they wake up and then you're woken up, and then my training was horrendous that year. I was sleep deprived, and I was under sleep deprivation stress, and it was probably one of my worst years, if not the worst year racing. But then slowly he started sleeping like a normal human does, and then in 1995 I came back and I won my 6th title. But sometimes you just have to say, okay, this is not the year that I'm going to go do this crazy, wild, hairy beast of a sporting event, because there's something else going on in my life that will make it very challenging. I have 2 girls, they're taking my time, and I just can't put in that time. So why stress about it? Yeah. There will be a time when those girls are old enough that you can do that thing that you want to do. So it's looking at balance as being something that happens over the long haul, not just from one day to the next.
And there's 2 of those 9 keys again, isn't it? Honor yourself and slow down to go faster. So Mark, there's such wisdom in those sharings. Mark, before we throw to a performance round, a rapid fire series of questions, just to touch on what you would designate as the highest moment of your athletic career and why, and then the lowest moment, the darkest day of your athletic career and why. Would you mind sharing those? Yeah,
well, let's start with the darkest one. It was probably in 1987. At the Ironman, I was in the lead with 10 miles to go. I had pulled away from Dave Scott in the marathon. I had a 5-minute lead on him, and I thought, there's no way that this guy is going to make up 30 seconds a mile in these closing 10 miles, because I was running really strong. I was putting a gap on him. But a mile later, I realized that my nutrition wasn't being absorbed, and I was running out of gas. And so the next aid station, I slowed down. I got a little extra food and drink, and then I started running, and it made zero difference. So the next aid station, I walked through and got more fluid and sport drink and stuff to eat, and it wasn't absorbing. And a mile later, I was walking. Dave passed me at about mile 24 of the marathon, mile 23 and a half, something like that. And I was completely out of gas. I thought I had won. I thought I had the victory, but once again, I completely fell apart. And it turned out that I had internal bleeding in my intestines, and so I ended up having to go to the hospital, spend the night in the hospital, and it was just devastating, because that year I did more training than I'd ever done to that date. And, I had a lead later in the marathon than I'd ever had before. And I still couldn't pull it off. And I ended up in the hospital, because of the effort and because of everything just shutting down. And so that was the hardest, maybe the hardest one to pick the pieces up after. But then the partner to that was, in 1995, my final Ironman, which, I'm probably most famous for my first win in 1989, because it was such an epic day-long battle with Dave Scott being side by side and neck and neck all the way till the very end, and the margin of victory, 58 seconds. An amazing day, and for sure that's one of the top moments ever in my racing career. But I think 95, my final Ironman, was the pinnacle, simply because I was 37 years old that year. Nobody had won the race as a 37-year-old. Nobody had won 6 Ironmans and 6 starts. Dave won 6, but he had a loss in there. And then when I came off the bike, I was 13 and a half minutes behind the leader, a young guy, 24-year-old Thomas Hellriegel. And nobody had closed a 13 and a half minute gap to be the champion. So starting the marathon, I had 3 different levels of impossibility facing me. And I was able to, I could spend a whole hour talking about that race, but I eventually did catch Thomas. There were many moments where I just couldn't see myself even taking another step. But Brant had done a lot of work with me that year to really get me in the right place, so that I would be able to just pull myself back into that quiet, stable champion's mindset quickly when I got out of it. And there were 1,000 moments where I was ready to say, I can't do this. But slowly I made up the time. I finally caught Thomas. I passed him. I went on to win my sixth and final title. And, so that was actually the greatest moment. And one of the things that made it the greatest for me was that my son was there, seeing me race for the first time. He was almost 2 years old. So, I didn't know if he would ever, if he would even remember that, but he would be in the energy of it, And so it was just a precious thing to see him at the finish line, coming across in first place, knowing that would be my final Ironman. And I couldn't have scripted my exit more perfectly. Just worked out.
And that's that testament to that commitment of not burning yourself out and training smart. But it's just interesting, 1,000 moments you overcame in that race, 3 levels of impossibility. Been obviously conscious of the time here, Mark, but the 3 levels of impossibility, what were they? Just briefly.
Well, the 3, like I said, one was that nobody had won 6 Ironmans and 6 starts, which was what I was hoping to do that year. The second was trying to win as a 37-year-old, which nobody had ever done at that point. Craig Alexander ended up winning as a 38-year-old in 2011, I guess it was. And then the third level was what happened what I was facing coming off the bike, being 13 and a half minutes behind the leader. Nobody had closed that big of a gap to be the champion.
You're listening to triathlon great, 6 times Hawaii Ironman champion Mark Allen, sharing around the highs, the lows, and the learnings of his remarkable triathlon career. Support for today's show comes from Sanitarium PB. Looking to achieve your personal best? Sanitarium PB can help. This refreshing drink contains 32 grams of protein per serve to help with muscle recovery when included as part of a balanced diet. Sanitarium PB is made with a balanced blend of milk and plant proteins, all your essential amino acids, and contains no artificial sweeteners. Find Sanitarium PB in delicious chocolate or vanilla flavours at your local fuel station. Be your personal best, recover and refuel with Sanitarium PB. Support for today's show also comes from Pogo Physio. We exist to help you get back to your physical best following injury. We want everyone who walks through the doors of Pogo Physio to complete rehabilitation, get back to their physical best, and cross their physio finish line. We do this through traditional session-to-session appointments, as well as some very popular fixed-fee rehabilitation options, including our monthly wellness booster packs and our 2, 6, and 12-week fixed-fee unlimited access finish line programs. To find out more about Pogo Physio's services, jump over to Pogo Physio and schedule your 1-hour initial appointment. For now, let's jump back with Mark Allen, 6 times Hawaii Ironman triathlon champion, sharing around his highs, lows, and learnings. Mark, with the performance round, rapid questions. Are you ready? First one.
I'm ready.
Training session most disliked. What was that throughout Mark Allen's career?
Oh, I can tell you exactly. It was a loop of a thing called the Boulder Reservoir in Boulder, Colorado. It was dead flat around a reservoir, which it's about a 5-mile loop. You would think it would be nice and fun because it's around water, but it was this dry, flat dirt path that went all the way around it. And I suffered every time I did that. It's so simple, but so many triathletes would do their Ironman run training out there because it was flat and it was fast. I would do it once a year and say, I'm never doing this again.
Training session most loved.
Training session I most loved. I have 2 of them. One was a track session. It's 8 quarters. It sounds so simple, right? But I absolutely loved it because it was, to do it right, it was so hard and so challenging, but so fulfilling. And then the other training session that I loved was actually a stage bike race that we would do. It was a stage bike race that we would do. We would start in Boulder, and then we would ride to Vail one day, and then the next day we would ride from Vail to Aspen. And so you're going over these just magnificent high Rocky Mountain peaks and passes, and you're out in the middle of nowhere, and it was. It wasn't even like training, even though it was these horrendously long bike days. It was really, really fun.
Mark, what fueled you to the Ironman victories? What was your favorite pre-race meal?
Well, I wouldn't call it a favorite meal by any stretch, but it was the meal that I had. It was basically I'd have a can of something that was very similar to what we have today called Ensure. It's a meal replacement drink. It was kind of like a chocolate shake almost. I would have one or two of those. I'd have a piece of toast with some butter and salt on it and a little bit of water, and that was my pre-race meal.
Yeah, good distinction between the meal and the favorite meal. Mark, who's the athlete that you most admire and why?
One of the guys that really inspired me was it was Carlos Lopes, who won the marathon in the LA Olympics, because I think he won it at age, I think he was 38 when he won it, and I was much younger then, and I didn't even know anything about triathlon, but it really stuck with me because I thought, this guy's 38. That's too old to be able to win a gold medal in an endurance event, in any event. And it really intrigued me that maybe, because as a swimmer, my mindset growing up as a swimmer, I started swimming when I was 10. I quit at the end of college when I was 22. I just assumed that after 22, it was all downhill. But here's this guy winning a gold medal at 38. And so that stuck with me. And maybe that's what sort of helped me to just keep going as many years as I did and to win Ironman at age 37.
So it left a real impression. Mark, I ask this of every featured performer on the show, and that's the toughest competitor that you ever raced against and why. And I assume I know your answer, but I'll still ask all the same.
Yeah, well, the answer is pretty clear, Dave Scott. And the reason why was that, and I can give the best example is of that race in 1989. When you're in the Ironman and as the hours pass by, you go from being very logical and thinking oriented to being very intuitive, and it's like you just shift into this very different way of sensing everything that's going on. And as the race unfolded and I was with Dave the entire day, it just became easier and easier to kind of feel how he was, what his state was. And on the marathon, as we were running along, we're out in the middle of the lava field. It was about the half marathon point, and I could just feel that there was no trick or move or surge or anything that I could do that was going to intimidate him the least. The only way that I was going to be able to win was to outrace him, and that was very, very intense, because most of the other competitors that I competed against, if we were kind of in a head-to-head situation, I pretty much knew there was something that I might be able to do that would kind of make them mentally crack for a moment and give me the break that I needed. Dave was as rock solid as any human being could possibly be, and that was such an intimidating experience to be in, knowing that, okay, I just have to surrender to that and just stop trying to come up with some goofy thing that's going to make him crack, because he's not going to crack.
Like, hi, my name's Mark Allen at the 4-hour mark of the first Ironman. Mark, was there a mantra, a consistent piece of self-talk that you used to have going through your mind when you were racing? A consistent piece.
People ask me that. What were you thinking about out there? And as best as I could, I tried not to think about anything. Again, just taking that breath and kind of going, and getting your mind to be quiet. And in quiet, you actually have like a heightened awareness, like you're aware of more things, because you're not thinking, you're not focused on yourself, and you're tuned into everything. But when I would say stuff, it was, you're going to laugh, I would just count. I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like you're counting your rhythm as you're running, or you're counting your pedal stroke as you're going 1, 2, 3, 4. It's just something so simple. I don't know if it's almost like self-hypnosis or whatever it was, but there was, I would have some sort of things that I thought I would tell myself when I was out there if I got in trouble, like, you're strong, you're smooth, stay relaxed, or whatever it is. But, all those positive affirmations that you come up with, first of all, if you can remember them in the race, you're doing pretty good, because I can never remember them. But if you can remember them, when you're feeling really crappy, there is no way you believe those things. So it's like, what a waste. It didn't work for me. Some people, those type of things work great. But for me, it was very simple. Get my mind to be quiet. If that didn't work, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 1, 2. It's so simple. That's all it takes to win an Ironman. Just count.
Just count. And you know what? As a physiotherapist, I spend a bit of my day educating runners around their cadence and the effect that often has on their lower limb injury status. And so I often instruct runners to count their cadence and not look at the technology bit to manually count it. So that's very good to hear from Mark Allen. Mark, if you could have one word or use one word to describe your racing style, what would that one word be?
I'd say surrender. Most guys try to control the race. They try to control themselves. They try to control the dynamic. Something as challenging as an Ironman is so much bigger than anything you can control. And so I really tried to just surrender, to be willing to do what it took within the dynamic of what was going on each year. What's really challenging about that is that a lot of times what you have to do is something that's completely out of your comfort zone. So maybe one year it means that you've actually got to go slower on the bike than you want, because to stay with the leaders, you're going to blow up on the marathon. That's very uncomfortable. It's a risk. But that happened in 95. If I had gone with the leaders on the bike, I would have blown up on the marathon. But because of that, this gigantic gap opened up. But I had to surrender to the fact that, okay, if I go with them, I'm going to blow up on the marathon, so I won't win anyway. Most people, they have an idea of how they want the race to go, and when it doesn't go accordingly, then they either throw in the towel or they freak out, and that's not surrender. Surrender is such an important. It was such an important thing for me, I should say, to just surrender and say, okay, this is what's happening today. Let me just deal with it. Let me be quiet long enough to come up with the solution to figure out how I'm going to turn this thing around. So again, like in 95, I came off the bike and I was 13 and a half minutes behind Hellriegel. And that was not something easy to surrender to, because I'd never been faced with that kind of a deficit before. And I thought, there's no way I can make up 13 and a half minutes in a marathon. That's just too much time. And it's like, I've got to make up 30 seconds a mile every single mile without fail to catch him at the finish line. There's no way I can do that. But I knew I had to surrender to the fact that that's the situation I was in. So a little while later, the solution came. Just make up a second or an inch, whatever you can, each and every step of the marathon, and just see what happens. That was something I could get my mind around. But I wouldn't have come up with that solution had I tried to fight the situation that I was in and not accept it, not to surrender to it.
You're listening to Mark Allen, triathlon great, 6 times Hawaii Ironman champion, sharing around his highs, lows, and learnings from his sporting career. If you missed last week's episode featuring 2012 London Olympic triathlon champion and 2016 Rio Olympic silver medalist Nicola Spirig, sharing around her highs, lows, and learnings, then here's a snippet of what you missed.
If you have a good race, if you just feel good, you don't think much. It just flows, and to me that's quite amazing. To me, if you have a bad race, I start thinking a lot and too much. But if I know I have a good day and I feel good, there don't have to be much thoughts. It's just enjoying the feeling, and that's when I'm in the zone. To
tune into the full episode 138, featuring Nicola Spirig, download the episode from your favourite podcast player, and while there, check out the archives dating right back to episode 1, featuring surf lifesaving Ironman Ali Day. For now, let's jump back to triathlon great Mark Allen on his highs, lows, and learnings. Mark, final 3 questions in the performance round. How would you describe being in the zone? I mean, is that the quiet that you speak about, the surrender?
Yeah, that's the zone. That's the flow. That's where you stop analyzing. You stop trying to decide, is this good? Is this not good? Am I going fast enough? Am I not going fast enough? And you just fully immerse and engage yourself in the the act of moving, of being efficient, of keeping your stride loose, of keeping your cadence going, of using the right muscles to generate the power on the bike, of just not worrying about anything, not worrying about the outcome. Of course, you want to have the race that you want to have, the result that you want to achieve, but stay in that moment and just giving everything you can within reason in each moment, from one moment to the next, to the next, to the next. And that's the flow. And when you're in that flow and your mind's quiet, the time passes pretty quickly. Like, especially on the bike, all of a sudden you've gone 10K and it feels like it was just a couple minutes ago that you saw that last mile marker or whatever it is. When you're out of the flow, when you're out of that zone, from one aid station to the next can seem like an entire day. So. And
when was the last time you were in the zone, Mark?
Well, in a race, the last time I raced, but I surf a lot, and living here in Santa Cruz, and it's very similar. You're in that flow, in that zone when you're tuned in. It's almost like you don't have to think. You can feel the waves coming before you can even see the set coming. That kind of a thing, and you start paddling out. And other days you're not in that flow, and no matter where you paddle, you're in the wrong spot to catch the wave, and it's frustrating. But I try to get in that every single day when I'm surfing. I try to get in that every single day when I'm like writing something, writing a blog, or when I'm doing a video cast or something, because you get in this flow, and it's like stuff comes out very creatively that there's no way you could have thought of it in advance. It's almost like a spontaneous play with life itself. And so in the physical realm, it means that you're in the flow, and your performance is something that's extraordinary, well above anything you could have sort of thought about and scripted. It just happens.
And do you think there's a link between longevity and the ability for someone to spend time in flow, whether it's physically or writing a blog, as you say, creative outputs?
I would say yes, because when you're in the flow, it's like you're connected to you're plugged into the universe, because you're working on a level that's greater than yourself, and so it's like it's almost like you don't have to do anything to make it happen, because you're the vehicle for something to come flowing through you, whether it's a great performance or an amazing article or an interview that you do with somebody, and it's like, wow, how did I come up with those questions for that guy? Dang, I got a good podcast today, or whatever it is. And I think that's life-giving, that's fulfilling, it because it's like you touch the pulse of the universe, and it just charges you up. It's very different than when you're having to force everything to happen. That's draining, that's exhausting.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, our time's drawing to a close, but a few final questions. Your world of coaching, and obviously we can find you online easily, markallencoaching.com, and there's so much that you can share. But if you had to boil everything you've learned through your own athletic success and your time, many years spent coaching successfully now, down to one principle, one piece of advice for listeners of this show to help them pursue and perform at their physical best, what would Mark Allen's one piece of advice be?
Set your goal and be patient. Come up with something that's exciting for you to pursue, but then be patient in fulfilling that dream, fulfilling that goal, and never ever shortchange yourself with what that dream might be. You don't have to tell people what that amazing dream might be, but if it has importance to you, then pursue it, go for it. And if for some reason you don't make it, you will have had such a great journey because it had importance for you to try. Those great journeys are the ones that take on a life of their own, that turn your life into something that you never could have imagined. Triathlon was that for me. It was one of those journeys for me. I wanted to just do Ironman one time, and then I was going to get a career, figure out what I was going to do with my life. But it was just this thing that kind of had this spark inside of me that I didn't have to set the alarm to get up to train, because I was excited to get up and train. And through that, then it turned into something that here we are in 2018, and almost 30 years, 40 years past when I started.
Yeah, and from that wide world of sports viewing with the freak show, as you termed it, and I'd probably add there, Mark, you didn't have to set the alarm because you placed a high value on sleep. You were well rested and ready to go. But Mark, every guest of the Physical Performance Show issues listeners with a challenge for the week, a physical challenge. So what's Mark Allen's physical challenge to listeners going to be?
Just do something every day, exercise every day, and make it non-negotiable. It doesn't have to be something that's long or hard or exhausting or have any purpose other than just moving your body. Human beings are meant to move. We're meant to. We're not meant to just sit all day and sit all night. So. Most people that Brad probably listen to your podcast, this is no challenge for them because they probably already do it anyway. But if you don't do that, make it your mantra this week. Go out and move every single day. No excuses, non-negotiable. And then at the end of the week, do it next week after that.
Yeah, beautiful.
And keep going.
Absolutely brilliant. Mark, finish this sentence. The most important thing in life is...
Oh boy. The most important thing in life is learning. It's not achieving, it's not accomplishing, it's learning and then sharing that with others and helping others learn.
Mark, what drives you to work hard? Final few questions.
I don't look at things as working hard. I just look at it more as other people might look at what I'm doing as working hard. It's more that if I have something that I'm trying to get good at or to perfect or to put out that other people will be able to use that will help them perfect themselves and be better people, have a better experience in sport, in life, then I'm willing to do whatever it takes on my end to make sure that what I put out is of value and is of worth, and sometimes that just takes a lot of work.
Yeah, beautiful. Mark, last question here. What mistakes are you afraid of making?
The only mistake I'm afraid of making is just wasting time. Life is so short, and you don't want to head down the wrong road with anything. Like, I wasted time pursuing whatever it is, and had I found this thing that now I'm doing that's so exciting, had I found that earlier, then I wouldn't have wasted all those years. Well, I don't ever want to have that feeling. But if the reality is, if I look back, I realize that everything has unfolded absolutely perfectly, even if in the moment I thought it was not working out the way I'd hoped, and I'm wasting time right now. It should be different, like the years that I wasn't winning Ironman. Again, if I look back, without my cynical, whining mind, I realized, wait a minute, that was absolutely perfect because the island was teaching me all of these things that I needed to know to be a champion. And without those, I wouldn't have been a champion.
And isn't that paradox of, once again, slowing down to go fast? It took time.
Yeah. Yeah, life is a paradox.
But it was directed to, as you say, knowing and setting your quest. And Mark Allen, your coaching services, your books, Fit Body, Fit Mind, and The Art of Competition, they are fascinating further glimpses into your world and in your learnings and teachings. Where can we find those? I'm sure they're available easily online.
Oh, yeah. Amazon's got them. Best place to get them. And
also your workshops. Those in the US or wanting to travel internationally can find the Fit Body, Fit Mind, Fit Soul, I should say, workshops happening soon.
Yeah, you can go to fitsoulfitbody.com, and we always have them up there. Or you can go to shamanism.com, go to upcoming programs, and you'll see all the Fit Soul, Fit Body workshops. We have one here in Santa Cruz in February. We have one in March in Massachusetts at the Kripalu Institute of Yoga and Health, and we've taught the Fit Soul Fit Body workshops all over. We've done them in Argentina and Canada and over in Germany and a lot of different places. So it's something for everybody, because we're all hardwired the same, and just how we utilize those hardwirings, that has different expressions for sure, though.
Yeah. Mark Allen, thank you for your time today and sharing the highs, lows, and learnings.
Hey, my pleasure. I'm glad I could be a guest on your podcast, and I look forward to listening to all the future ones you put out.
So there you have it. How about that? The great Mark Allen. I trust, in fact, I know you enjoyed that episode. Wasn't there just so much that Mark shared? Absolutely great insights, and I believe we could have spoken for hours and not exhausted the interesting stories, concepts, and tips that Mark had to share with us. Now, if you did enjoy today's episode, please do me a favor. Jump over on Instagram or Facebook and let Mark know. You can find Mark on Instagram at Mark Allen Grip. That's GRIP. And also easily over on Facebook. Of course, check out Mark's great resources over at markallencoaching.com, and also Mark's books, The Art of Competition and Fit Soul, Fit Body, 9 Keys to a Healthier You, which, as Mark shared today, were really the roadmap to Mark's first and historic 1989 Hawaii Ironman Championship victory. Don't forget to have some fun with Podsies, a screenshot of the episode that you are enjoying. Now, I know so many of you are going to enjoy Mark Allen, so take a screenshot, tag myself in at Brad_Beer, the Physical Performance Show at Physical Performance Show, and Mark at Mark Allen Grip, and let us know what you're up to as you enjoy today's episode 139. Big thanks to you, the good folk, who have been subscribing and also leaving ratings and reviews on iTunes for this show. Those actions help the show enormously in getting into the earbuds of more people who, just like you, are looking to pursue and perform at their physical best. Subscribing's easy. You can do that from whatever your favourite podcast player is. And the benefit of that, each week this show will pop into your feed automatically. A big thanks this week to show supporter Bear4222. Bear rated the show 5 stars over on iTunes, commenting, love the show, many different and individually brilliant in their own way people we can learn from. Keep up the great interviews. Bear, thanks so much for taking the time to leave a review over on iTunes. To say thanks, I'd like to send you a signed copy of my Amazon running and jogging bestseller, You Can Run Pain-Free. So drop your message over on social at Brad_Beer on Twitter or Instagram, or email b.beer@pogophysio.com.au, and Bear will get that book in the post to you. A big thanks as always to the very good folk who make this show possible week in and week out. That is Daryl Misson, our audio engineer, Susan Wilkin on all things show administration, and Matthew Walding on all things graphic design. Of course, another huge thank you to today's show sponsor, Sanitarium PB. Podcasts are certainly free to download, however, they are not free to produce. So Sanitarium PB, thank you for your support. And if you're at your local fuel station, be sure to check out one of the great tasting Sanitarium PB products. Okay, coming up on next week's episode of the Physical Performance Show, episode 140, we keep the featured performer theme going with Irish running superstar Sonia O'Sullivan. Sonia's career, just like today's guest Mark Allen's, spanned a remarkable 4 Olympic Games. That's 16 years. Sonia picked up the silver medal in the 5,000 metres at the Sydney 2000 Olympic Games, won a remarkable double-double at the World Cross Country Championships in 1998, where she picked up gold in the 8 and 4 kilometre events across 2 consecutive days, something that had never been done in the history of running. She set some blistering fast times through the 90s, including a 2,000 metre world record that she set in 1994 of 5:25 that still stands to this day in 2018. Sonia's got a fantastic backstory. She's married to Australian Melbourne Track Club coach Nick Bordeaux, and her sharings were so rich around her highs, lows, and learning. So be sure to tune in next week to another featured performer, Sonia O'Sullivan, Irish running great. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.